and welcome to another episode of Legacy's Allure, brought to you by MTG Training Grounds, the educational series dedicated to providing you with all the info on popular decks, strategies, insight, and more for the Legacy format. I am your host, Zachary Cuck. Today, we have a special guest whose name needs little introduction. He is an accomplished wizard with plenty of high-level results to boast, including 20 Star City Games Open Top 8s, 5 of which resulted in a win, 1 Star City Games Invitational Top 8, and 1 Star City Games Invitational Top 16. He has a handful of Star City Games Premier IQ / Classic Top 8s and wins. He is a 3-time Star City Game State Championship Top 8er and a 1-time winner. He is a 1-time Star City Games Players Championship competitor. He is one of Star City Games feature match commentators and a Star City Games select content provider, and he now streams Magic online full-time on twitch.tv. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce today's guest, Chris VanMeter. Chris, welcome to Legacy's Allure.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. So, you are here to talk to us about Sneak and Show, the boogeyman combo deck of Legacy. So, let's just kick it off. What is Sneak and Show? Explain sort of how the deck works, what it does, and where it came from.
Well, Sneak and Show is a blue-red combo deck.
Mm-hmm.
I'm honestly not exactly sure where it originated from, but the one of the namesake cards in the deck is the card Show and Tell, and so there have been plenty of different combo strategies built around the card Show and Tell for quite some time. You'll find it in decks like Reanimator. It was used in like the Omni-Tell deck that partially got Dig Through Time banned, where you put Omniscience into play. So that's the namesake card. But you're primarily using Show and Tell, which is 2 and a blue sorcery. Each player can put an artifact, creature, enchantment, or land from their hand onto the battlefield. And it uses Sneak Attack, which is an enchantment, costs 3 and a red. And you can pay 1 red mana to put a creature from your hand onto the battlefield. It gains haste, and you sacrifice it at the end of turn. And using those 2 cards alongside Gristlebrand and Emrakul, you can draw your deck, get a bunch of counter magic with Force of Wills, or just annihilate your opponent's entire board with Emrakul. So that's primarily where the name of the deck comes from, and those are kind of the key pieces for it. And then you have a bunch of supporting cantrips and counter magic.
Okay, so you've started into the next question, which is really, what does the Sneak and Show deck look like? Like, what are the key spells, and why are they important? And not just Show and Tell in this case and Sneak Attack, but what are some of those like supporting spells, and why are they important?
Yeah, so you have Sneak Attack, Show and Tell, Gristlebrand, and Emrakul. That's the glue of the deck, and one of the reasons I feel like it's one of, if not the best deck in Legacy, and it's just a very consistent combo deck because you have 8 copies of each of your combos. So you have your monsters, Gristlebrand and Emrakul, and then your enablers, Show and Tell and Sneak Attack. So with 8 copies of each, it's very likely that you're going to be able to find them on time.
Mm-hmm.
But the supporting cast, obviously you're going to have Force of Will, just a free counter spell.
Mm-hmm.
But because only Show and Tell out of our 8 combo pieces are blue, you kind of have to fill the rest of the deck with blue cards to support using Show and Tell. Mm-hmm. And thankfully, cards like Brainstorm and Ponder play very well in these combo decks, where you're able to sculpt your hand to either have your combo with protection or find alternate pieces of the combo to push through permission, or just find something that you're missing. And then you can get into playing some type of soft counter magic. So you have Spell Pierce, cards like Flusterstorm, those see a lot of play. One of the big things recently is a contention between Gitaxian Probe and Preordain. So the initial versions of the deck, you would find it would just play a full set of Gitaxian Probes, not only as a way to just like smooth out your draws and get the information from seeing your opponent's hand, but it's also a blue card for Force of Will, so it kind of fills all of those roles. But the more I've played the deck, and the more that I've worked on it with other big name Legacy players like Jerry Thompson, I've leaned more into a Preordain role where getting the information, seeing my opponent's hand really isn't as important, because I'm getting to the point where I'm learning what are the things that I have to play around based off of how my opponent is positioning themselves, and just being able to dig deeper and find the actual cards that I need with Preordain over Gitaxian Probe has been a lot more important for me.
Okay. So really the deck is permission, combo pieces, and ways to find a good collection of those 2 things.
Yeah, I mean, what else do you need?
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. It's Now I've heard some people refer to the deck or describe it as sort of a glass cannon, right? Like everything revolves around either sneak attack or show and tell. You have got to get one of those two pieces, or the deck really doesn't do much of anything. Because you don't have like a backup plan. There are no like 2 mana creatures or something to, to kill your opponent with outside of the big win cons. Um, so would you say it is a little soft in that regard, or is it resilient enough because of those? Because you said there's like the 8 redundant combo pieces on both sides that it doesn't actually need a backup plan, and obviously the way it's built, I guess it doesn't. But would you care to elaborate any on that?
Yeah, with having 8 copies of your combo, it's you're going to be able to find, piece something together eventually. So even if they just have like a flurry of hand disruption to rip your hand apart, you're still able to set up these situations where you're drawing live off the top of your deck, which is a very important aspect for a combo deck and Legacy, is to be able to win through hate, because that's basically what Legacy is just combo decks and then non-combo decks with sideboards that try and interact with the combo decks.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the versions will play something like Jace the Mind Sculptor in the main, since it plays well with your fast mana. You have Lotus Petal and cards like Ancient Tomb or City of Traders, so able to get an early Jace down. Sometimes that can just win you the game, because a lot of the cards that are going to see play to try and interact with your combo aren't going to do much against the Jace the Mind Sculptor. But I found that I just prefer to play as many cantrips and counter spells and just jam the combo as possible.
Okay. So are there any other variants of the deck? Now you sort of alluded to Omnitel, which I know is one variant, but are there other versions, or actually explain what Omnitel is as separate from Sneak and Show, and then also if there's any other variants, explain what those are.
Yeah, so Omnitel was a version that used just Show and Tell and the card Omniscience, which is a 10 mana enchantment that lets you cast all of your spells for free. Now that deck kind of like catapulted to the forefront because of how well it was able to use the card Dig Through Time, and then you didn't have to rely on something like Enter the Infinite like you had to previously. But now with Dig Band, I actually think that the deck just isn't playable at all. I'm still seeing a few versions, top 8 here and there, that are just using Show and Tell Omniscience and then just like a bunch of normal 1 mana cantrips along with Cunning Wish to find cards from their sideboard. But I just actually don't think that the deck is playable and would not recommend anybody to play it. If you're wanting to play a Show and Tell deck, I would definitely recommend Sneak and Show. There is one version that I've seen people working every now and then that try and incorporate Burning Wish as a way to play extra copies of Show and Tell. So you can have 3 Show and Tells in your main along with some number of Burning Wish, and then be able to Burning Wish for the 4th copy of Show and Tell out of your sideboard. But again, with having 8 copies of each half of your combo in the main deck, I actually don't think that it's needed, and I feel like it dilutes your deck more than it gives you a benefit.
Right, and like you said earlier, you do still have to have a critical mass of blue cards. So if you start replacing them with Burning Wishes, your Force of Wills become a little less reliable and all those kind of problems.
Exactly.
Okay, so why do you choose to play Sneak and Show? Like, why does this deck appeal to you so much?
Well, I feel like Show and Tell has been the best card in Legacy for a very long time, and it deserves to be banned at some point because it's just a very degenerate card. So I'm just going to continue to play whatever the best Show and Tell deck is at the time. Right now, I feel like it's Sneak and Show. There's been periods in the past where I've played Reanimator. I switched pretty hard onto the Omnitel deck, which ended up getting Dig Through Time banned. Now I'm back to Sneak and Show. I just really enjoy playing the card Show and Tell. I feel like it's very powerful. Plus, who doesn't like attacking with an Emrakul?
Yeah, no, I mean, and you don't get very many opportunities to cast, or well, you're not actually casting. You're putting an Emrakul into play, but you don't get very many opportunities to do that otherwise. Like,
yeah,
a lot of decks have to go the honest route, and there is no Legacy deck that honestly casts Emrakul that I can think of, or at least no tier 1 version.
No, I actually don't think that you can honestly cast Emrakul. Like if you're casting Emrakul, you're not doing it honestly.
No, yeah, and I think that's one thing to note for all the viewers is Show and Tell is sort of the litmus test for can you play this card in Legacy, right? Like Show and Tell allows you to play the most broken or the most powerful it is the most broken and allows you to play the most powerful things there are. So if something costs more than 3 mana, it has to be more powerful than the most powerful thing you can play, right? Like it has to have a combination of things that can somehow circumvent a 15 mana monster.
Pretty
Like
much.
so that's why anybody who's familiar with Legacy knows that like there are very few 4 mana spells or beyond that are played, right? Like you have like Jace the Mind Sculptor. In this case, you have Sneak Attack, although you're sort of cheating there too because you can actually show and tell that if you have to.
Yep. Yeah. I think things like ad nauseum,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
things that cost more than 3 mana, or that cost more than 3 mana, don't see a lot of play because, I mean, you're just going to lose to show and tell.
Right. So show and tell becomes your barrier. Like if the thing you're doing isn't more broken or have a synergistic brokenness better than show and tell, it's probably not worth doing, or show and tell is probably just the better version of doing it.
Yep.
So, what decks is Sneak and Show good against? Like why is it a strong deck, and what do you want to play against with it?
So I feel like Sneak and Show is pretty good against basically everything in the format, depending on how much sideboard hate they have. So like one of the reasons I kind of moved away from Sneak and Show in the past was because of how popular Containment Priest was. And that's like when Omnitail started to get extremely popular was just because like Containment Priest kind of pushed show and tell, not so much out of the format, but pushed people to find other ways to interact with it. And that's what led to moving to Omnitail. And in fact, I didn't touch on this earlier when we were talking about different variations for Sneak and Show. But earlier this year at Grand Prix Seattle, I played a list that I worked on with Jerry Thompson. I ended up going X4 after conceding to Arielax to help him out with some pro points. But we had 2 Omniscients in our main deck alongside the rest of the combo as a way to try and combat Containment Priest. So decks that can actively use Containment Priest in a very good way have the potential to be good against Sneak and Show, which is primarily Miracles. However, you can always just beat that deck by jamming a show and tell and then not having an answer. So anything with Containment Priest, I would say, has the potential to be good against you, but I feel like I'm favored against almost every other deck.
Okay, and I mean that makes sense, right? If you're gonna play the most broken spell in the format, it had better have a lot of power. Like it's kind of like playing Storm, right? You can hate Storm out, but you're assuming that you have a good enough matchup, especially game 1 against almost everything, that without the hate, you should get your game 2s like 70% of the time or more, just because that's the way Legacy works, right? Like you either bring the hate for the combo or it probably gets you.
Yep.
So what you've sort of alluded to this then, but what decks are good against Sneak and Show? Like what are its weaknesses?
Yeah, again, just primarily anything that can take advantage of Containment Priest very well. Miracles is the deck that comes to mind. Some of the Death and Taxes decks might play Containment Priest, even though it's not a very good combo with their Aether Vial. It's still good enough to give them access to it. And then it actually isn't all that great against Reanimator. So like, you're a show and tell deck where your show and tells can potentially be bad. Because if they just put in something like Gristlebrand and you're not putting in something just like straight up Emrakul or Sneak Attack, then you're going to lose the Gristlebrand fight. But outside of that, I feel like I'm favored against almost everything.
Okay, and I know another card that sometimes gives the deck a little bit of trouble, although Sneak Attack will help you get around this, is Caracas, right?
Like Caracas can definitely be good against you, but Sneak Attack always beats it. A lot of people aren't aware of that, but you can you Sneak Attack your Emrakul onto the battlefield, go to your combat step, they Caracas it back to your hand, you just re-Sneak Attack it, and then you get to attack with the Annihilator trigger. And then if they let you attack and then bounce it before it deals damage, then you still get the Annihilator trigger, and they can't really survive that for too many turns.
No, yeah, they'll eventually run out of permanence. You can definitely do that. Okay, so it is an overall very strong deck then. It just seems like has a few little weak spots and a major weak spot to Containment Priest. So
yes.
So excuse me then. Assume outside of Containment Priest, is there anything that other decks should be doing to try and fight back? Like what are good sideboard cards? Again, we'll ignore Containment Priest because obviously that's good. But is there other like strategies you can employ that are good at fighting against Sneak and Show?
Ensnaring Bridge is actually pretty good as Usually there's only one or two ways post board for the deck to actually answer an ensnaring bridge. So having something like that is worthwhile. Um, you know, permission is fine. One of the ways we used to fight the mirror before is with something like Swan Song, since it can counter Show and Tell and Sneak Attack. I like the Spell Pierce is another card that can do the same thing, and a lot of people will just like try and bring in a bunch of Red Blasts and then lose to Sneak Attack and Through the Breach. So like I really like having things like Swan Song, Spell Pierce, and Flusterstorm as ways to interact. Hand Disruption is always good, so you do want to have that, but again with eight pieces, there's going to be a lot of times where we just end up getting to dry out of whatever it is that you're trying to pressure us with.
Yeah, I know in the past, my experience, some of the decks I've played against Sneak and Show, it seems like you either have a lot of permission and a fast clock, or you have to have like hand disruption that will just keep on taking, like Liliana the Veil. Like if you can strip them down to 1 or 0 cards, Liliana can pretty much hold the fort the rest of the game, because it is still a 2-card combo ultimately. I mean, obviously, I guess you could still do Sneak Attack, but then you have to have like the right sequence of draws to get both the land and a Sneak Attack in play. So that could certainly buy you a lot of time, I would guess.
Yeah, Liliana can definitely buy you time, but it's only going to be effective if you have it backed up with something like Tarmogoyf for pressure.
Right, yeah. No, well, and that's another sort of truism, I don't know if that's a word, but of Legacy is like you can't fight the combo decks with hand disruption or something for like a few turns if you're not going to back it up with all sorts of pressure and so on. So, okay. So what does Sneak Attack do to fight back against the sideboard hate against it? Like, people are going to bring in cards like Containment Priest and stuff and Ensnaring Bridge. So what do you have as like the counter to their counter?
So usually you're going to find some type of Blood Moon effect. It's going to be very good. A lot of the Sultai decks are going to be extremely weak to Blood Moon. I don't really like it against the like Temur Delver type decks, because you can still lose to just like a really early Delver of Secrets, but it's really good against any of the Sultai decks. You're also going to find cards like Jace might be in the sideboard, and then you'll run into a lot of Through the Breach as a way to counter Red Blasts. At the last Grand Prix I played it in, I also used Sudden Shock as a way to kill Thalia even through a Mother of Runes, and it also gives me a way to kill Containment Priest and Monastery Mentor.
Okay, so some removal and some just like different cards, right? Like Through the Breach is basically a one-time sneak attack, right? Like it just puts the creature into play. It gains haste, so you basically get the effect you want, but it avoids red elemental blast, which is sort of
and I mean, being able to attack with a Gristlebrand or attack with an Emrakul or attack with a Gristlebrand and get a Gristlebrand activation is usually going to be more than enough.
Right. Yeah, that just it starts the snowball then once you get to activate and draw a whole bunch of cards and basically do it all over again. Okay.
Yep.
So why should someone consider playing Sneak Attack? Like, is there a certain type of player that you recommend it to?
Actually, I recommend Sneak Attack to everybody, and whenever anybody is new trying to get into Legacy and they want to know, what type of deck should I play, it's the one deck that I recommend to newer players. It's a very good deck to learn how to play Brainstorm. So that's an important part of Legacy, is learning all of the proper interactions on how to play your Brainstorms. It's a very high-powered deck, so there are going to be times where you just, kill your opponent on turn 1, which is always a good feeling when you're first getting into a format, and is a equalizer on taking away a skill gap if there happens to be one between you and your opponent. On top of that, owning the combo pieces, Sneak Attack, Show and Tell, Gristlebrand, Emrakul, Volcanic Islands, Force of Wills, while they tend to be a little pricey up front, those cards are going to retain their value, and it's just good to own them.
Yeah, that's definitely a recurring topic sometimes with this podcast, is that there are some decks that, although they're incredibly powerful, they're very expensive to get into, and they're not malleable, or their pieces aren't interchangeable. And I've noticed that with some people, they recommend trying a deck that definitely has more flexibility. So the things with your Force of Wills, with your blue dual lands, and that kind of stuff, and don't go after your tabernacles and primal or what's it called, natural order, and those kind of things where it's like basically one deck where you get to play them. Okay,
Yep.
so you sort of said this, but there is, I assume there is a high skill barrier to mastering the deck, but it seems like the skill barrier to learning the deck is relatively low. Do you think it's good for newer players, so that should play into their decision some if they're trying to get into Legacy?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's the perfect starter deck for Legacy. Like, it's going to teach you how to play Brainstorm. You're probably going to lose some games by brainstorming incorrectly, but I feel like it's like the perfect Legacy starter deck.
Well, and that's sort of the skill gap you alluded to earlier, is like your show and tells are pretty straightforward. What you're doing with them and how you're like killing people is obvious, but getting to that point, that's where the brainstorms and the ponders and stuff come in. And that, I guess that's, everybody has to, go through the growing pains of making bad ponders and bad brainstorms before they actually get to the winning point. Yeah. All right. So tell us about a moment when you were playing Sneak and Show, one that like really resonates, something that was special, and why was it so special? Like what about that game or that match was cool, and why?
Well, there was a match where at the Grand Prix in Seattle where I'm playing the mirror,
Mm-hmm.
but like he's not exactly sure if I'm on the mirror, but I could tell from the way he's playing that he is on the mirror. And I let his real early show and tell resolve instead of trying to fight it because I had omniscience in my hand. And I just was like 99% sure he didn't have omniscience. So he put Emrakul onto the battlefield, and I put omniscience onto the battlefield, and then untapped and cast my own Emrakul and killed him. So that's the one that sticks out in my mind as of recent.
No, that's cool, especially if you've got the one up tech like that, where like, actually, in that case, even if all you did was put out Emrakul, you'd probably still have him. But with omniscience, he's never coming back from that, right? Like, you're about to take an extra turn, and yeah, things are about to get ugly. All right, so let's step aside from Sneak and Show just a little bit. Now I want to talk about Chris VanMeter. So you've been a regular on the Star City circuit for quite some time, and you've written and recorded a lot of content for them over the years. So how has being an iconic figure like that affected your development as a Magic player, both personally and professionally?
I mean, it's been just a huge boon. Like, I started just hanging out with Jerry Thompson and AJ Soccer, like two of the players that
Mm-hmm.
I hung out with a lot when I first started to play on the Open Series, and that I learned a lot from. And then just kind of working my way into Star City and hanging out with all the guys there in Roanoke. I honestly don't think that I would be where I am now, as a player or as a Magic professional if I hadn't had that chance. And I definitely appreciate everything that Star City has been able to to give me a chance to do.
Yeah, no, I read pretty much everything that Star City produces, your articles included, and I noticed you've been doing some streaming now too, because you moved back to Washington, right?
Yeah, I'm originally from Tacoma. I was
Mm-hmm.
living out in Roanoke. My fiance got offered a job back, a real nice job here in Washington, so we decided to move out here, and now I'm out here in Washington.
Awesome. All right. Well, you recently started doing feature match commentary for Star City, and I don't remember what your first one was, but I know you did the Legacy Open at Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I think, and I'm sure the viewers and listeners also agree, that that has got to be one of the coolest jobs. Like, just getting, yeah. I mean, no. Tell us about it. Like, what is it like? Is it everything it seems like? Talking about Magic and getting to hang out with other Magic professionals like all day, and that's what they're
Yeah,
paying you to do.
yeah, it's been great. My cohort is Andy Boswell.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm doing any shows, it's going to be with Andy. It's been insane. I appreciate the chance to do it. I know when Cedric and Patrick decided to reduce their schedule a bit with their new roles. Cedric actually reached out to me to see if it was something that I might be interested in, and how I thought that I'd be able to get along with somebody like Andy. And it's just been It's just been insane. It's fun. I will say that it's a lot harder than it looks, and I definitely have a lot more respect for Patrick and Cedric doing it as many times as they did it over the last couple of years, because it is exhausting.
No, I run a rinky-dink little tournament here in Alabama, like once a month, just a legacy thing. It's like 35 people, and I've been trying to do feature match coverage and be the commentator. And I'm realizing exactly what you're saying. Like, it is exhausting and incredibly hard to sort of like keep talking. Like, I don't know how you come up with stuff to talk about. Like, if they prompt you all the time, or if you just have to be like a really good conversationalist or something. But it feels like a
rough.
ton of work. Okay, so, well, before we go, any last thoughts on Sneak and Show, on Star City Games, on Legacy in general? Something you want to tell us?
I think that Legacy is a great format, and I know that a lot of people seem to be worried that it's kind of falling out of favor. Eternal Masters is going to be coming out. I feel like there's going to be a revival in the format, and I think that Sneak and Show is just an insane deck. So if you're looking for a deck to get into Legacy with, I definitely recommend Sneak and Show. It's real fun, and you get to do some extremely unfair, very powerful things, which I know that's always something I'm looking for.
While we're real briefly on the topic of Eternal Masters, will we see Show and Tell reprinted in there, or Sneak Attack, or any of the pieces really for the deck?
I'm not 100% sure what is and what isn't on the reserve list. I do know that those two cards, Show and Tell and Sneak Attack, have been reprinted as judge promos, so I don't think that they are on the reserve list.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they're not. So they could.
And if that's the case, I definitely expect to see them in Eternal Masters.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. It would.
All right. Well, Chris, I am glad you were able to join us today, and I would like to personally thank you for not only taking the time to give us your thoughts and experience with Legacy's most broken combo deck, but also for sharing your insight into some of the inner workings of Star City Games.
Not a problem. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it was great. And thank you to all of our listeners and viewers. It has been a pleasure to bring you this episode of Legacy's Allure. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe and feel free to leave us feedback on our YouTube page. Or you can message me directly at mtgtraininggrounds@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook at the user MTG Training Grounds, and follow us on Twitter at MTG_TR Grounds. I am Zachary Cook. Thank you for joining.